Hello, architect, mainly architect. I'm not an architect, but I'm a geographer working on housing frequently and embedding housing in what I'm doing normally, that's urban geography. And what I'm going to present is something, well, some overarching concepts which might be useful for comparing different countries, different cities. I'm presenting material from different projects, but mainly from one I worked on 4 or 5 years ago, together with Petr Czech, who is here from Gionica Institute in Brno, a branch of the Czech Academy of Science. Is that correct? Yeah. And we were doing comparative housing research embedded in a bigger concept. And I think this can be well applied to comparing mass housing in different countries, such as the Czech Republic and Austria. All you need for this concept is data on population of city cores and the surrounding areas. In Brno, this would mean the city of Brno with, I think, 138 communes of commuters to the area. And you look at these areas and look how they develop, and some big pattern will come out. And this is of interest to people who are interested in mass housing. This is the concept many of you will have never seen. It distinguishes between a phase of urbanization. This is when the core city is growing stronger. Another phase is suburbanization. This is the phase where Prague is in right now. And there is another phase called disurbanization. This is what our East German colleagues call shrinking cities, when the whole city region loses population. The fourth one is not so important. If you fill in actual data for Vienna, for instance, you see a city which for a long time in its history has been urbanizing from the first census we had in 1869 to 1910, in the interwar period, which is not here, in the 1950s, this is pink. Yeah? But then all of a sudden, from 1960 onwards, Vienna suburbanizes, same as Munich and Graz and Linz and other places. Briefly, Vienna has been in a phase which all Czech cities went through in the years of transformation in the 1990s. You went through a disurbanization phase. We also had that in the 1970s. It's almost 10 years now that a student of mine was interested in comparing Bratislava. And we filled in the data for Bratislava into this scheme, and the result was the pink phase, urbanization, continued much longer in Bratislava. Yeah? And of course you have the idea, if this is the case, then maybe it's the case in all transformation economies. This was the starting point. So you see Bratislava went into the blue phase in the 1990s and came back into a suburbanization phase with growing municipalities around Bratislava city soon after. So we looked at the third city, Prague, which follows more or less the Bratislava model, a blue phase in the 1990s, a green phase from the 2000s. Massive suburbanization. I do not know of another city where the suburban commune, European city, where the suburban communes grow at a pace of 31% in the decade or 3% per year. South of Prague, this is reality. So this is when Petr and Standa joined. We were looking for the bigger thing. We wanted to have more Austrian and more Czech cities on board to test whether this is a general pattern. So we chose big cities: Vídeň, Praha, Štajerský Hradec, Brno, Linec, and Plzeň. Linec for the Austrians is Linz. And we looked for the patterns through the ages. And this is the result, which is chaos at first sight, but it shows two very different regimes, and this is the link to mass houses, which I'm going to take up. From the distance you see periods and cities which are in green. From the left, it's Linz core, Linz ring, Linz functional urban region, Graz core, Graz ring, Graz Föhr, Vienna core, Vienna ring, Vienna Föhr. Yeah? So the half of it is Austrian cities, and they started to suburbanize, to become green in that coloring from the period 61 to 71. You always have to read backwards. So in all Austrian city regions, in the 1960s, the suburban ring started to grow faster than the city itself. Reason: mass motorization. Volkswagen invasion makes it possible to suburbanize. And Austrian cities were swept away by this suburbanization movement over the decades, whilst on the other side you see the Czech cities of Prague. It's so small on my screen. Prague, Brno, and Plzeň, with 3 columns each, and they are pink. Yeah? Pink means they are urbanizing. Why do they urbanize? Because state housing and cooperative housing within the large city limits of communist countries, they continue. Then comes the Velvet Revolution, and whoop, many emigres or temporary emigration sets in. This is the phase of disurbanization, of shrinking cities. But soon after the dark line, you find Czech cities happily in the group of urbanizing urban regions. Meanwhile, also Brno, who has come later in this classification, is also suburbanizing. But look on the other side. The Austrian side has switched sides again. It's urbanizing. It was very surprising for urban planners and urban researchers that somewhere in the 2000s we discovered, hey, the central city is growing faster than the suburban region. And this is what you feel and see, and what creates a need for new housing, should I say mass housing, but we'll see pictures. This was the starting point. I think, Petr, you agree, it's still our theory. This is the case in many transformation economies. They have been kept compact by a specific housing system which didn't allow suburbanization. Suburbanization came later. Partly it's certainly also a statistical artifact due to residence rules. Even if you had a chata and you stayed there, you were not, it wasn't advisable to register there. It was not possible. So in Brno, I know there is a debate on where to register students who are in town in large numbers. So this is the starting point, and we started, and these are some conclusions which I mentioned already. Suburbanization came 30 years later than in the capitalist world, but it came very intensively. In all planned economies, in most planned economies, it will be the case. Some have never come back from disurbanization. There is an intermediate period of this shrinkage which has been very frequent, but it's over in many Czech and Polish cities by now. In the 2000s, we are in a new phase, which brings new demands on the housing economy. There is more demand for urban housing, and our politicians have to cater for that. This is more details on the concept. We also looked. That's a discovery of ours. I don't know. Petra is also that happy as I am. In the planned economies, you have very large city limits because you could draw boundaries here at your taste. Yeah? Whilst in traditional Western local democracy, it's not. You cannot. What's the wording? You cannot include Eingemeindung. You cannot attach suburban communes easily. So there is a discrepancy between how cities are defined. Yes, and you find, this is detail for. And now we come to the urban part of it. There is, as you know, if population increases a lot, then there is a housing background. People don't move somewhere without housing production or changes in the housing provision. So in any high growth region, we should find the housing which gives rise to this population jump and increase. If you go to the suburbia of Prague, it's all over the new housing. And if you go to parts of Brno of the 1960s, which you will see the maps, it pops out the places where the panel housing has been built. So this makes it interesting to. This makes this concept helpful as a framework for picking up housing projects, we think. And we have been continuing on that line. We started to research Linz and Brno in greater detail. And we started with Brno and Linz, together, and we looked into the most recent development first. I'm traveling backwards in history. I know that you are interested in mass housing, but there will be kind of mass housing in the 2000s. So we are looking at Brno in the 2000s. What you see is suburban communes which are very intensively growing, whilst at this time this is data we assembled in 2008, Brno itself is decreasing as a whole. And there were no data within the city limits by district. And we are comparing it with Linz, which is moderately growing, and the surroundings are growing faster. This is the area where we looked for high growth areas. It was difficult to find high growth areas within the city in Brno when we made field research 2008, 2009. There were few pockets of high growth. Yeah? Growth was beyond the city limits. In Linz, it was different due to the how should I say? Due to the interest of the Austrian state housing policy, Upper Austrian and Linz authorities, there is, I don't know, for my taste, it's mass housing of 1,300. If we have been talking about then this is all under the label of mass housing. This is also mass housing. 1,300 subsidized non-profit homes within the city limits of Linz in a ecologically friendly way. You see what the alternative is. This is the suburban sprawl within Linz on the southern edge, whilst the other one is the more compact, better planned solution. Aerial view, this is how it looks. Solar panels, schools, shopping center, integrated new tramway line. Yeah? This is a development which only a state builds which is interested in social housing in 2005. If you leave it to the market, necessarily you have to stick with smaller projects. And what I remember is near Lesna. This is the pockets of high growth apart from Utjechov, which is also within the city limits. So what I remember from our project is the neoliberal solution here necessarily leads to smaller units. This is one of your slides, Petra. I don't know how it continues, but I know that it has gone down after the crisis, new production in Brno. And on the Austrian side, I know that the social, the housing policy contributes to stabilizing production, whatever happens. Yeah, we continue building whatever happens, or at least we try to do so. Going back into the earlier history, into these 1990s of transformation, we find a very contrasting picture. In these early years of transformation, hardly anything was built. Well, the projects from the communist times were finished, but then it took a while until new companies formed and new builders came. But self-help prevailed. People were running outside the city boundaries in Prague and Brno and converted their chata into a substantial house or granny's house, etc. So this was the intermediate years, whilst on the Austrian side, you see it in the colors, yeah? the Austrians continue to suburbanize. What can we see on the ground, 1990 to 2001? I think Novi Liskovec is a project from earlier years which was completed, and then people came in thousands, and this increases the number of population substantially. On the Linz side, they built this not very inspired project of within city housing. This is how it looks like. Ebelsberg is known in Linz, so in Linz. Going back to the 1980s, well, the funny thing with this is to use it like a finger theater, the children's books, which is to jump from decade to decade and look how the colors behave. And in the 1980s, there is a strong contrast between the Czech side and the Austrian side. It looks as if most of the Czech cities are decreasing, but you have to look at very intensive hotspots of new construction. These are the violet. They don't pop up that clearly. So you know the places where these panel-built or mass housing in Prague, in selective locations at the end of the metro lines has been completed in the 1980s. And in Brno, near the dam to the west and to the east, there are hotspots of state and cooperative housing. So this was a time of a strong contrast. On the first line, I pointed to the fact that it's a third and last decade of stark contrast. 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, the system difference makes a difference to the regimes of city development. The 70s are pretty similar. On the Czech side, you see the violet hotspots of mass housing. On the Austrian side, it's more the suburbanization which dominates. How does it look like on the ground? From this period, we chose Bohunice in Brno and Schörgenhub. I didn't know the place before. In Linz, social housing of substantial size along between the rivers. Nothing spectacular, low density, but massive. Another place which is documented in the sociology literature, Biesenfeld in Linz, with 600 condominium houses. These are problem estates in Austria, must be in this country too. If you have an estate with 1,000 dwellings, yeah, and they are all privatized, how could you possibly unite it needs a master mediator to coordinate all these people to embark on renovation. And this is the same time, Brno, Bohunice, at the time where, well, I guess it's panel-built housing with the insulation just being added. Of course, you are interested in earlier periods as well, 1960s. This is the high period of panel-built housing, and I'm mentioning Vera Capella with the edited volume on Plattenbauten in Bratislava and Vienna. This is really, it's not widely known, but it's a very thorough publication. But I'm repeating myself. Back to the 1950s, we've been talking a lot about the 1950s. On the Austrian side, there is not much dynamics, but in the reconstruction years of Czechoslovakia, also housing has been built in quite some numbers, even at very high numbers in Pilsen. So where could we see such housing from the 50s and 60s? An old photograph from a Vienna PhD thesis, all black and white, and he wasn't allowed to do that, yeah, because he started with his PhD in the Prague Spring, and then he had to do, well, what the communists always thought. This was spy research, yeah. He continued mapping Brno until he was complete in 1973. So you recognize the place. You will go tomorrow, Lesna in 1973. And he made photos of everything which he found interesting. All this early high-rise housing. Remember notice the smoking chimneys in the back. Yeah, for the younger Czechoslovak generations, you smelled it when you came here, and the contrast between the old houses and the new attracted his interest until 15. And Petro knows, I love this Stalin Allee from Berlin, and variants of this in the Czechoslovak Republic. We bumped into this in Pilsen, brick by brick, but lovely, ornamented. Well, some similarity to the Vienna Council House style, which was outdated as a fashion, but spacious, a lot of amenities, and I think it's an attractive location today in Pilsen. Another thing which came to my mind, which is not widely known, this is a comparative housing researcher, Christian Donner. He was a one-man enterprise, now he's in pension, and he compiled housing policy documents from all European countries over years. Yeah, and he published them in his own printing office. Yeah, so but if you're looking for details, even if you're coming from you think to know your literature, Christian Donner talked to many people, and he has compiled everything. Yeah? And this is from one of his books, and this is more a question than a result. Why did cooperative housing start in 1958 in Czechoslovakia? Because if this is the case, then this is a special thing which is different from Poland and different from Hungary and other places. Further back in history, covering the whole war and back to the monarchy, if you compile all these data, just look at the colors. The left is the prosperous, growing country with massive growth, and the other one to the right is it didn't gain ground, this Republic of Austria, from the 1920s onwards. So the glorious story of Red Vienna is a highlight in the middle of not happening much in population development. I will be terminating with even older housing from Brno, from Walter Felber's PhD in '73. Podkastani is this, 1931. Masaryk type of civil servants housing, which I know also exists in Prague. Row houses from 1923, which attracted the interest of the then young Austrian PhD. Or other 1920s housing as it looked in the 1970s. I guess this is now pretty much upgraded. And last slide, back to the censuses of the monarchy. Look at the colors. Prague had an extreme growth in this period. It was growing faster than the capital of the empire. And Brno was also, central Brno was also a hotspot of population development for which housing had to be provided, although on a minimal basis. And I think the winner of it was Pilsen, which had an extreme growth. So what do I want to offer you for your comparative mass housing project? An umbrella pointing you towards comparative studies which are outside the housing topic itself. The first one is this concept of phases of urbanization, suburbanization, reurbanization, which come in different places at different times, creating different problems for economy and policy. Vera Capella's publication on Plattenbauten, which I highly recommend. Walter Felber's unknown PhD on Brno, if you happen to be interested in how it was. And Christian Donner, who not only published this book, but many other volumes on Western European housing policies and Austrian housing policy. It's full of details where you can find information on policies and production figures, etc. I hope I could offer you architectural historians on mass housing something. I personally love working across disciplines, and we Vienna geographers have a long history of doing housing research as well, since decades. So I hope you can work on that and it helps you. Thank you.
I think it's usually the Bezirk or something like that. What's the word for it? So what is the scale that you can go down? Could it even go down to a block size that you can actually? Yeah.
Today, yes, of course. Yeah. But if you're looking for long time periods, it gets, of course, the grid gets wider, the scale gets higher. It's no difficulty to have figures for communes, even recalculated for earlier commune sizes. Yeah. But as we know from Brno, it's difficult to go beneath the city limits in history, or to stay within the also within Vienna. Bezirke is okay, yeah? But deeper is not possible because we only introduced it must be similar here. Yeah? Around 1960, the European statistical offices started to make smaller areas, smaller districts, and then they could do their factorial analysis. Whilst the Americans had their census districts in 1940 already, so they could do smaller scale things.
My second question would rather go into a different direction. That basically, I mean, what you show is a deep analysis of the developments that have as a kind of analysis as regions have developed over time. But do you consider it as some sort of a tool that could also be used as, I'm thinking out of the architectural box, as kind of that you can plan and strategically use it for implementation of specific models in housing to counteract certain developments?
There is an analysis of Prague, which goes for the region of Prague, which looks at this, but compares it with housing completions, which is closer to what you are interested in. And of course, the question: how is the link between? Is it the link is different in different times and places? Because of course, 100 years ago we provided less housing, overcrowded. We provided overcrowded housing for much more people. So the link is the link would be the question, and the Prague colleagues have worked on that, and they are blaming the Vienna side. Hey, you're a civilized country. Why don't you have completion fee? We don't have completion fee since due to some within Vienna. It's a Vienna problem.
That's a particular problem of accessibility of PV data.
They had a change of capitalization. It's all digitalized and it doesn't fit to the old.
I came across a book. It was published, I think, in late 1980s, and it's just data on or statistics on Czech housing. I don't know if you have it, but unfortunately I can't remember the name. Maybe it was Mr. Procházka. I'm not sure, but I have something very, very specific, and the data has been had been collected very carefully. You know, from the basic level up to the on the level of the communes to regions and the overall statistics of Czechoslovakia. Very interesting, and it's a book which I don't know if it is in every library, because I found it by chance only. But if you are interested, I can make a photocopy for you, because you're not staying. So.
This is on Czech housing.
Yes, on Czechoslovak housing.
Yeah, Czechoslovak housing. Yeah.
Yes. But I was impressed by the way when there is a central plant economy that they collected the data, you know, because they had to predict the situation in the future. So they were still planning and collecting data. Very impressive.
I have to say that out of solidarity of a club which I've been on the board, European Network for Housing Research. Yeah, you're aware of this. This is the place where housing policy data are regularly exchanged, including special. So if you're interested, you can found a working group on art in social housing. Yeah, there will be people who will join you from different